I'm no stranger to writer's block. In fact, we've talked about it here on the channel before, but last week I met up with an old friend, imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about that, talk about what I did and am doing to work through that blockage, as well as look at the cue that spurned a week-long self-doubt spiral on my week 27 vlog check-in. What is happening, YouTube? This is Dave Croft. Welcome to my week 27 check-in. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. I'm so glad you found the video, found the channel, however you found it. Every week I am writing a cue and talking about it right here. This is 52 cues. You can join us over on Facebook, the Facebook group where we all get together and looking to write at least one cue. If you haven't already, if maybe you're an old timer or maybe you're new, why don't you consider liking and subscribing to the channel? It really does help composers just like you find the channel. I also want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons who, through their support, make this channel happen. We're going to be talking a lot more about that at the end of the video. And also, if you want to skip over the vlog bits, check out the timestamps in the description below. But I wanted to talk about my last week and imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome, in case you don't know what imposter syndrome is the phenomenon where you might find yourself doing something and feel completely unqualified to do. And you're worried, and there's an anxiety that builds that you're kind of going to get discovered as a fraud. And no amount of success that precedes that, no amount of work that you did to position yourself to be in that place where you can accept that opportunity, no amount of success can offset that, or it really often doesn't offset it. And that's where I found myself last week, battling an old frenemy, imposter syndrome. And it happened because I am pushing into new things. And anytime that I am looking to write cues that I don't know inside and out, backwards and forwards, anytime I'm doing that, then this imposter syndrome creeps up. And for me, it was writing like future bass, heavy, authentic EDM. Now, I'm no stranger to EDM. I have been writing like trip hop, acid jazz, and hip hop in general for quite a while. I know those styles really, really well. But these nascent styles that are coming up, which are hybrid blends, like future bass is like a blend of EDM, a little bit of like dubstep and bro step and all of that, with trap and hip hop. And so at that point, the Venn diagram of what I need to be able to do as a producer starts kind of closing in on itself. And so I had an opportunity for a publisher. They're wanting 6 of these types of cues, these future bass, EDM based cues. And I know the style somewhat, but I haven't written a lot of it. And I started writing, did not like at all what I was writing, and found myself just kind of working through some of the same territory that I'd already written, and just kind of my old personal tropes. And so I was like, okay, let's pause. Let me start doing a little bit of research, not just listening research. I started with that Spotify playlist and everything. But the further I listened, the more I was kind of thinking, I'm not exactly sure how I would produce that. I don't know what instruments make some of those sounds. And I know that modern EDM is as much sound design as it is music theory. And so I started feeling this, wow, there's a lot of this you don't know. It's a lot of this you don't know how to do. And that's when the little imposter, like, oh, you're going to get discovered as a fake. And no matter what you do, the publisher's going to hate it. It's going to get wholly rejected. And so I started, after listening, was like, okay, I don't have this style on lock. So I'm going to start watching some tutorial videos. And that is and was a very, very humbling experience. Partly because watching those videos, they just make it look easy. As I imagine what I do here probably looks really easy for some of you guys watching. And many of them are significantly younger than me, and they're just like folks in their bedrooms or in their home studios, on a laptop using like FL Studio or whatever, not necessarily these quote unquote professional tools or whatever. And so I'm watching them, and it sounds amazing. And it's like, yeah, do this, do this, do this. And more the imposter syndrome kind of kicked in. Some of that, admittedly, was ego and pride, just feeling that get kind of bruised up a little bit because, I'm a successful composer, right? I make a good portion of my living, making music, and I teach students how to make music. I teach at Full Sail how to make production music. I have private lessons. I teach privately, and this YouTube channel. I do weekly live streams. But here is this gray area of the map that hasn't been filled in yet, but I know it's there. And so I used last week to really push into that. And it was not a great experience. Like I said, a couple of false starts. One, I started on my live stream last week. And that's really kind of what set this whole thing in motion. I started doing the live stream, and I found myself in a kind of cul-de-sac. I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I need to do my research. Then I got into the research, got into the YouTube tutorials. So like I said, my ego and my pride really took a beating. And the ego part was, you're a successful published composer, Dave. You have a master's in music, Dave. You should be able to do this. You've been working in DAWs since 2001, 2000. No, I mean, back to like Performer, before Digital Performer, when I was in school. I'm no stranger to DAWs, no stranger to the tools that I see them using. But what I don't know is how they're using them. And that was really humbling because I had to self-examine during that. And so what did I do to overcome that? Well, I admitted to myself that my pride was getting in the way and my ego. You're never so successful that there's not something to learn. And that was the next key, is embracing this as being a student and learning something new. And once I kind of flipped, like, oh, I got a cue to write, to, hey, I want to learn everything I can about this new style and these new production techniques. Once I kind of embraced that, then things started to unlock slowly for me. And so started putting together a new cue. The cue from the live stream, I'm going to finish that up tomorrow night, on Thursday night, during our next live stream. But I put it aside and started a whole new session. Some of the things that were really a gray area for me were like manipulating samples and vocal chops and bringing vocal chopping in, and what kind of effects chain do you put on that, and how do you make it not sound like the original and embrace the sampleness of it, but also make it sound legit, like, a 19-year-old club DJ wrote this, not a 47-year-old guy with a master's in jazz. Right. So I had to really watch a lot of videos with the mindset of, I'm learning something new. And that, like I said, that's what really kind of unlocked it for me. So if you're battling with imposter syndrome right now, where you find yourself in a position where you have to deliver something and people have already accepted that you can do it, but you don't quite feel like you can, first of all, you're probably better than you think you are. Probably. Otherwise, you wouldn't get put in that position to begin with. And second, if you feel the imposter rising up in your psyche, then know that that's probably a good thing. It's probably a good sign. That means that you are pushing yourself. You are learning something new. You're adding more to your toolkit as a producer. So welcome the imposter syndrome, but don't succumb to it. Don't let it block you. And that's where I had been almost all last week. Almost all last week is I was really blocked. Over the weekend, it got really, really bad. And I was super down on myself. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm going to have to give up this contract, or I'm going to have to like find co-writers or ghostwriters, or just give the contract to somebody else. But I chipped away at it little by little, adding detail upon detail. And the map got filled in. Is it perfect? Is the map like I know exactly? No, not at all. Not even close. But it's not just a nebulous blank void now. And that is a comforting thought. What about you? What are the things that get your imposter syndrome? It's a little bit different than procrastinating. It all falls into the category of resistance, which Stephen Pressfield in his book, War of Art, talks about. Resistance is the thing that gets in your way, often stopping you from even starting. And I definitely found myself in that, where I wouldn't even sit down, and I would do other things, right? I would work on something in the garage, or I would play video games, or I would just watch TV or go to the movies or something. I let these things kind of get in the way. Stephen Pressfield calls all of those things resistance. Procrastination, imposter syndrome, it's a force of resistance. In fact, in his book, he talks about the list of activities that most commonly elicit resistance. He says the pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art, however marginal or unconventional. The launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise, for profit or otherwise. Any diet or health regimen, any program of spiritual advancement, any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals, any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction, education of every kind. Number 8, any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern of thought or conduct in ourselves. Number 9, the undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others. And finally, number 10, any act that entails commitment of the heart, the decision to get married, to have a child, to weather a rocky patch in a relationship. And finally, number 11, these are the things that are most commonly elicit resistance. Number 11, the taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. Those are the things that will elicit resistance in the form of procrastination, not wanting to get started, imposter syndrome. Anything on those lists, anything in that list sound familiar to us creative composers? Man, several ring out to me. But what about you? What do you do to overcome imposter syndrome? I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and I make every effort to respond to every comment. I will say, as a final thought, I'm not convinced imposter syndrome will go away, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay. And I hope that's not too discouraging for you, the fact that imposter syndrome, because the fact that it won't go away, because I believe that if you get that little resistance, that means that you are pushing into something new. You hear about professional athletes getting sick. The wide receiver, Steve Smith, for the Carolina Panthers, would throw up before every single game. And I think he's in the Hall of Fame. If he's not, he probably will be soon. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Now, let's take a look at the cue that spawned my week-long bout of imposter syndrome. This is a cue called Beauty and the Beats, and it was submitted. The good news is I submitted it, and I did the whole write, submit, forget, repeat. I just walked away, didn't check my email for hours, And I got the email back from the publisher, and he said, "Sorry for the late respond. Just listened. ... And I was like, "Oh man!" And that's as much as I saw in the email notification on my phone. Right, as much as I saw was, "Sorry for the response. Just listened. ... So I'm like, okay. Opened it, all caps. This is great. Got a text later. The music supervisors are over the moon for this. They love it. Absolutely love it. Already going into production. So happy ending. That's great news. But let's take a listen to Beauty and the Beats. So that is Beauty and the Beats. I called the style future hop, which isn't a thing. It seems like future is just, you put it in front. So it's like future bass, future house, future pop. So I call it future hop, but it's Beauty and the Beats. And the idea behind this is it's for a reality show, and there's like an orchestral blend thing. So there's like an element of tension, but it needed to be like super modern sounding and using, future bass type EDM sound. So some things I knew I was going to bring to the table: the strings. And I'm using my standard Symphobia strings with my Vienna Symphonic Library layered. But the first thing that I worked on and started working on were these vocal chops. And these vocal chops are a sampler instrument, using just a quick sampler, where I brought samples in, or one sample from Splice. And let me see if I can't actually find the sample itself. Oh, this is going to be difficult. It's called SFP something or other. All right, so this is the come on, Logic's being weird. Trying to get it to where it shows me my audio files. That's strange. Oh, all right. So clearly, all right. So this is the
to keep it going, racing to keep this moment. Is it worth it, or am I forcing it, or am I fooling myself?
I mean, it's okay. It sounded really nice, and so I brought that in and put this across a keyboard to where each one has its own. So basically every quarter note, or at this tempo, I think it's every half note. 2, 2, 3, 4. Right, so you can play the whole thing, but taking little chops and pieces of that. All right. Now, how I affected it was I brought in Neptune, which is Reason's tuning module. It's really, really good. I think to get something better than this, I believe you have to get into like Terry's auto tune and that kind of thing, which I don't have, and I do so little auto tuning type effects that I can't justify the cost at this point. But it sounds really, really good. Here is Bypassed. And then OTT, which is from Expert Records, which is a compressor, which I wouldn't think to use, but so many of the tutorials use it, and it's free, so that's cool. A little EQ and then some saturation. So without all of those things, the delay and reverb as well. One of the things I like about the auto-tune, the Neptune, is I can formant shift, which will make it sound pitched without speeding it up necessarily. And so it's so intrinsic to the style, using pitched, auto-tuned little vocal chops. Got auto-tuned F natural minor. And so that process, that involved several YouTubers and watching them, and with various degrees of efficacy. But I was pretty happy with it. Pretty happy with creating a new melody. Okay, so going down, I added a high ARP, which is just a pretty standard Omnisphere arpeggiator thing, a vocal pad sample from Splice, a bell pad from Omnisphere that I've sent to an LFO, which is another plugin by Expert Records. It's essentially sidechaining without like dialing in a kick and using a compressor. The real big difference between using this LFO tool versus an actual sidechain is when you sidechain using a compressor, then it's really kind of squashing the whole sound and then releasing it, whereas this is essentially a volume attenuator, so it's just making it louder and softer. It's very customizable, but you're not really getting the compression sound, the compressed effect. And so you can do the same thing with the tremolo tool or any sort of tremolo modulation, in case if you don't have Logic. I did layer that with a saw pad. With a bass synth pulse, also sidechain. And I'm going to go here towards the end so I can kind of go through the rest of my sounds here. Have a wobble bass from Omnisphere. Running through a the sound itself kind of pumps like that. It almost sounds sidechain. And so that's cool. Piano, just doing big octaves, and then a reverse of the same piano notes. And the reverse is being run through the side chain. Some brass stabs, which are one-shots that I brought into Alchemy. So we have this one shot, and then this one shot. Low strings, high strings, just playing that same bass hit. By the way, I looked over, or I skipped over my high strings. These are just Symphobia strings. I've talked all year long about Symphobia, layered with Vienna Symphonic, which are super dry. Okay, moving down, my 808, which is a one-shot loaded into Alchemy, run through the fat effects, which is a stock Logic, basically distortion. So doing some hard clipping, and this is something that I saw. That was from I'm a Music Mogul talked about using this, and then distortion, because Future Bass has these really wide glidey leaps. Then we get into my sea of samples, my sea of loops. A kick drum, a snare drum, and run through a parallel compression chain just using the one knob. So without, it's okay, but this really makes that pop. Hi-hat loop, a second hi-hat loop, and I love layering hi-hat loops like this. One I will keep pretty much in the center, and then the second one I will add some tremolo modulation effects to kind of push it around the stereo field. Some percussion. Another percussion loop. Almost like ticking clocks. And I'm using tremolo tool to also push that around the stereo field, as well as a sample delay, which widens that out. So all of my percussion together with my 808. All right, and then we get into some crashes and other one-shots, a taiko roll into a crash. Oops. This little water drop effect. Impact. Have another impact over here, which is a clap impact. My snare fills leading into my drop, and then a tom fill. And when you're approaching this drop, right, pull all the sound out and then hit the drop, which is, you know, from a production music standpoint, this is creating an edit point, but EDM producers don't think of these as edit points for a video editor, but that's absolutely what's happening there. And then finally, little sweep into the drop or into the drum fill, a big, long, synthy pitched riser. And then finally, a big riser leading into this, into my main verse, kind of going back to my opening statement after the first drop. Right, So really it's A, B, A type 4. Actually, it's A, B, and then A plus B, which I do all the time. All the time. So sprinkle it all together. And once I had all of my sounds happening, then it was just standard production music form. You know, I'm adding layers. What new energy can I bring to the table after my first phrase? I'm dealing with 8-bar phrases here. Now I'm going to add a groove, which is really spacious and open. Then a build, risers, approaching my first drum fill into my drop. Wash, rinse, repeat, add layers. Now adding the strings, and it's this rising action, or the rising progression. Bomb, 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 bomb. Then add layers again. And we're about to go back to our A section. So we're pulling the energy way back, and then we're going to push it forward again. Drum fill before the drop. And then keep going. Well, there's one impact I did not talk about, and this is another, just a cymbal swell impact. It's layer upon layer of sound, which makes the mix and the editing a little challenging, because you really have to make room for everything with your low end, especially. Notice that there's a low cut on a lot of things except for the 808. This ensures that the 808 gets all of the room by itself. It gets all of that low end all to itself. So I feel very fortunate that the publisher enjoyed it, and they want more. So now I have to make 5 more of these cues. So wish me luck. I will be finishing my first swing at this on this week's live stream. Speaking of live stream, I live stream every week, and it is a benefit to my Patreon patrons. To be a patron is just $1, and you get access to my weekly live streams, and you can ask questions and all of that. So if you're interested in that, check out the Patreon information below. And thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do all of that normal YouTube stuff. It really does help composers just like you find the videos and find the channel. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you for hanging out with me this week. I hope your week 27 was great, and I hope you have a great week 28. We're halfway through the year, and I will see you next time. Until then, peace.